Tailor Yorgo's New Day. Tuesday, June 30th, 1453. As the sun rose over Constantinople, no now Istanbul, the smell of gunpowder and death was slowly replaced by the coolness of the sea and the dust rising from the rubble. Exactly 1 month and 1 day had passed since the siege ended. The city was like skin trying to scab over a deep wound. The pain was fresh, but life somehow had to go on. In his small shop under a ruined arch in the lower market, Tailor Yorgo opened his eyes. He was in his 50s. In this shop inherited from his father, he had spent his life sewing silk dalmatics, tunics, and heavy chlamys, cloaks, for Byzantine nobles, wealthy Genoese merchants, and occasionally for Varangian guards. The nights were no longer punctuated by cannon fire. This was a grace. But it had been replaced by the occasional sound of Turkish commands, and the rhythmic sound of patrolling Janissaries' boots on the stone pavement. Yorgo sat up in the small room at the back of his shop. He was still afraid. His wife and daughter had taken refuge in a monastery just inside the walls during the most violent days of the siege, and later managed to flee to relatives in Galata. He had not heard from them. Yorgo washed his face and hands. He ate the last piece of hardtack biscuit, and a few olives left from the famine. Then he raised the heavy oak shutter of his shop with a squeak. A month ago this place was filled with endless panic and cries of despair. Now, however, an uncertainty reigned more than a deep calm. Turkish soldiers were clearing the rubble, stacking the wood from collapsed houses aside. On the corner of the street, the shop of his former neighbor Leon the baker was now closed. Leon had died in the final defense. Yorgo opened his workbench. Fabrics. Those beautiful Syrian silks, Egyptian linens. Most had been looted. What remained were a few bolts of wool, some torn garments and spools of thread. His first task, as always, was to sharpen his needles. This was his ritual. Even if the world crumbled around him, the needle had to be sharp. Hours passed. Most of the people passing by the street were dressed differently now. Yorgo saw a few old customers. These people, who once walked with pride, were now scavenging for food, heads bowed in miserable clothes. Toward noon, a shadow appeared in front of the shop. Yorgo looked up and flinched. 2 Janissaries stood in the doorway. They were tall and stern-looking. One was holding a dark red caftan covered in blood and mud stains. "Tailor," one said in broken Greek, "patch this." Yorgo took the caftan with trembling hands. The fabric was good quality, Bursa velvet. There was a deep sword slash on the shoulder. "Yes, sir," he murmured. The soldiers left the caftan there and departed without another word. "We'll collect it in the evening," one shouted without turning back. Yorgo sat at his bench. This was the first new job he had received since the conquest. He was going to repair the caftan of an Ottoman soldier. As his needle went in and out of the thick velvet, a fabric he was unaccustomed to, the trembling in his hands stopped. It was just a cloth. And he was a tailor. His job was to mend what was torn, perhaps like this city. He had finished the caftan and folded it carefully when a different person appeared at the door. This was not a soldier. It was a middle-aged Turk, wearing a modest turban and a clean, simple robe. He had a calm face. "Selamun aleyküm, master," he said in clear Turkish. Yorgo understood a little Turkish. He stood up. "Aleyküm salam, sir." The man smiled. "My name is Ishak. I am one of the scribes in the divan of Sultan Fatih. I am one of those newly settled in the city. I need a sturdy wool robe to wear as winter approaches." Yorgo was surprised. This was not a repair job, but an order from scratch. And from a scribe. "Do you have the fabric?" Yorgo asked hesitantly. Scribe Ishak said, "No, but I have money." He placed a few silver axes on the table. "I don't yet know where to find good fabric in the city, but I heard you do. Find the fabric and sew it for me. I trust you." Yorgo looked at the silver coins. These coins were the most real thing he had seen in months. This money meant he could bribe a boatman to get a message to his wife in Galata. "I will find it, sir," Yorgo said, his voice firmer this time. "I must have some good wools left over from the old Genoese in the storage." Scribe Ishak nodded. Yorgo picked up his tape measure. A Byzantine tailor was taking the measurements of an Ottoman scribe. Shoulder width, arm length, chest circumference. Measurements were universal. After Ishak Effendi left, Yorgo ventured into the small storage room behind the shop. At the bottom of the chests, he found a bolt of high-quality, dark blue English wool he had saved from the looting. He had been saving it for a senator once. That senator was no more. He spread the fabric on the workbench. As he drew the cutting lines with chalk, the sounds from outside had changed. A month ago at this hour, church bells would ring from the Hagia Sophia. Now from that massive dome the call to the evening prayer, Ezan, was rising, recited for the first time in a complete ritual. A powerful booming voice echoed through the wounded streets of the city. Yorgo paused. His needle remained in his hand. This was not the sound of his city, but it was the new sound of the city that was now his home. As darkness began to fall, his shoulders aching, he stopped working. The Janissaries came and took their patched kaftan, placing a few silver axes on the table with a thank you before leaving. Yorgo had cut the main pieces of the scribe's robe. He would baste them tomorrow. He slowly lowered the shutters. The creaking would mark the end of the day. He squeezed the axes and mangwers in his hand. Today, for the first time since the conquest, he had been a tailor. He had not just survived, he had worked. He retreated to his small room. Outside, the patrols of the new masters walked. The crescent atop the Hagia Sophia gleamed in the moonlight. Yorgo lay on his bed and closed his eyes. The city had died. A new city was being born. And this new city would also need robes, kaftans, and clothes. Yorgo was a tailor. And he had much work to sew tomorrow.